Hey everybody, welcome to the GameChanger Lacrosse podcast. I'm your host, Joe Evoli. The GameChanger Lacrosse podcast is about talking to people who have dedicated their life to the game of lacrosse and learning about who they are, how they got to where they are today, and what they do to improve themselves and their teams. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at GC Sports, and if you're a coach or a parent, check out GameChanger Team Manager in the App Store. You can ditch the emails and spreadsheets. The free GameChanger Team Manager app streamlines communication, scheduling, and live scoring into one easy-to-use app. GameChanger Team Manager is 100% free for your entire team. Learn more at gc.com/team manager or search for GameChanger Team Manager in the App Store. Today in the show, we have the head coach of Navy men's lacrosse, Rick Sowell. Coach Sowell is a graduate of Washington College, where he was a two-time All-American and National Midfielder of the Year. During his time there, he won 2 national championships. He started off his coaching career at Washington College as an assistant to the 1986 National Championship team. He then moved on to become an assistant coach at Georgetown before taking the head coaching job at Dartmouth University. His final season at Dartmouth, Coach Sowell's team won their first Ivy League championship since 1965. He then moved on to restart the lacrosse program at St. John's University. After St. John's, he took over as head coach at Stony Brook, where he was named America East Coach of the Year in his final 2 seasons. He then took over as the head coach at the Naval Academy in 2011. He's now on his 7th season as head coach at Navy. He's helped guide the Midshipmen back to the national spotlight with their 8th Patriot League title in 2018. Coach and I got a chance to talk about a lot of different things like connecting with players, learning different coaching styles, one of his models for tough decisions, injecting fun into practices, and much more. Here's my interview with Rick Sowell. Coach Sowell, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be a part of it, Joe. I appreciate you reaching out and looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to talk. So let's get started like I always do. How'd you get started playing lacrosse?
How I got started playing lacrosse? Well, it all started, I was back in junior high school. Now, I was your traditional 3-sport athlete, played football, played basketball, played baseball, and so when I was in about 7th or 8th grade, I guess it was, a teacher came to our school district. He had just graduated from Hobart College, where he had played lacrosse there back in the 70s, and so he comes to our school district. He teaches math, and so there's where I meet up with him. He started coaching basketball. I played freshman basketball for him, played JV football for him. Well, and I guess I was in 8th grade. He started the lacrosse program at my high school, Horseheads High School in upstate New York, just probably an hour and a half south of Syracuse area. Right. And so he started. It was a club. It has to. You have to go 2 years of club before you become a varsity. So, it was a club lacrosse sport, and I didn't know much about it, Joe, to be honest with you. And I would see, guys walking around with sticks in their hands, but didn't really pay an awful lot of attention to it. Right. Meanwhile, again, I was playing for Coach Moffat. Tom Moffat is his name, and as I mentioned, played football for him, played basketball. Well, when I was a sophomore, that was the first varsity season for the program, and so what he did is he started recruiting, a bunch of the athletes, guys who played football and basketball, and we still talk about this story. I don't see him an awful lot, but when we do see each other, it does come up. But football ends whenever in May, and from whatever day it ended in May till literally the day before the first day of practice, which was probably sometime in March back then. He was trying to convince me to play lacrosse. Come on, you got to play lacrosse. And I'll remind you, I played baseball. I was a sophomore at the time. I probably was going to try out for varsity baseball. Yeah. And I was a decent baseball player. I made all the all-star teams growing up and all. But of the 3 sports, that probably was the one I wasn't as good in. And so but I still wasn't sure. And of course he's trying to explain the game to me, and sticks, and you can hit people, and you can get away with it. And I'm looking at him like, what? And I don't know to this day, Joe, what ultimately led me to say, you know what, I'll try it. And as I mentioned, it was the day before. I'd never seen the sport before I played it.
Yeah.
The day before the first day of practice, I committed to playing, and I guess you could look back and say the rest is history, because it has meant so much in my life. I just can't even begin to explain. But that's how I got going.
Yeah. Can you remember what it was that, or when it was when you decided, like, hey, this is the thing that I wanted to play at the next level, that you wanted to play in college?
Yeah, well, and that's a great question, because my first year, I was a long pole defenseman, and back then the rules were you could have one of those medium length sticks. I can't remember when they changed the rule, but so I didn't have a long pole, and I didn't have a 42-inch pole, so I played long pole. That was my first year, and then my junior year, I became a midfielder, and so that's when I things, I guess, started to click, and started to have some success. Our team was having success. My first year we were 5-13. My second year we were 10-8, and then my senior year we were 14-5. We lost in the first round of the sectional playoffs. But so, we were a program that we had a lot of pretty good athletes. We had a coach that was, an excellent coach. He was very hard on us. Back in the days of, where you could really push your players and dare I say even do things and say things. We kind of compared him to Bobby Knight. I don't know, how familiar you are with Bobby Knight and the way he approached the game, but that's the thing about it, Joe. Our football teams, our basketball teams, and then now our lacrosse teams. He used to just work us so hard in practice, and of course, you're high school, you're wondering, what you're doing, why you're doing, but we won, at the end of the day. And so I think, and if I really had to, give an answer as to why I ultimately chose to play lacrosse and follow this coach, was because at the end of the day, we won every sport that he coached me in, and we I would say we paid the price, but we certainly worked to have that success. And there's something about that, where you've worked your butt off. He's pushed you beyond what you thought your limits were, and then you see results, And we weren't the most, as you can imagine, we weren't the most skilled lacrosse program. I mean, we've only been playing for a couple of years. A lot of guys were like myself, started playing that first year. And so as I got into this junior year and then my senior year, he was the one who was planting this, the bug, like, man, you can play in college. I thought I was going to go play football, and not big time football by any means, Division III football. And then as it turned out, I was going to try to play both. And I was maybe going to go to Ithaca. I was thinking about Cortland. I was thinking about Hobart's, where I was actually supposed to go for more football than lacrosse. I was a quarterback. It was a quarterback, D-back in football, and so my coach was the one who said, "Hey, man, I think you could." You got a career in lacrosse, and I wasn't sure. I don't know. I'm just kind of going along, and I guess I was taking him at his word, and so I was supposed to go to Hobart. Things didn't work out there academically. I did not hold up my end of the bargain academically, so I ended up having to go to a junior college, which I thought I was going to go for 1 year, and then I would transfer to Hobart, and that didn't work out. And lo and behold, I stayed at my junior college for 2 years, Covasco Junior College. It's in upstate New York, which back in the early '80s, it was along with Nassau and Farmingdale. And, Covasco, I mean, you want to talk about some really good lacrosse and players
really
that went
good
on
lacrosse players,
went on to play big time, play Syracuse and, Maryland and Washington, you name it, Towson and Hobart and Cortland. I mean, it was, and it was different back then, back in the '80s. But yeah, there's some really good lacrosse, junior college lacrosse programs. So
Right.
I ended
Yeah.
up having to go to Cobleskill.
Yeah. So tell us. I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but how did you end up at Washington College?
Well, I ended up at Washington College because the league that I played in high school, Corning East. You've heard of Corning East, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The head coach, his name was Joe Corcoran. Well, his son, one of his sons, was Terry Corcoran, who was a star at Hobart, and he was actually really good friends with my high school coach. And so he ended up the year before, I guess my sophomore year, he ended up getting the Washington College job. And so they were in a rebuilding phase, a little bit of a rebuilding phase then. And so he was, looking for, junior college players. And of course, again, he knew my high school coach.
Right.
His dad, of course, knew who I was from, playing against each other. And so he was the one who, convinced me to go to Washington College. It was certainly a lot different from where I grew up. I'm an upstate New York guy versus Eastern Shore of Maryland. It was a very small college. I looked at Maryland a little bit, looked at Delaware, at least visited those schools. But man, when I went in to talk to him, and there was like 4 or 5 of us from Cobleskill that went on a little recruiting trip, and man, we sat down and he just, started talking about what he wanted to do with the program. And I just knew right then and there, I didn't know much about the school.
Yeah.
I just knew I wanted to play for him. And so I was the only one of the group of us. A couple of the guys that I went on that trip with went to Syracuse. Chris Bruno and Matt Cacciato. They were defensemen. Didn't play a lot, but they went to Syracuse. And then the other ones with I forget, Towson, one with the Maryland. But I was the one that went to Washington College. And then a couple of guys behind me, a year behind me, they ended up coming to Washington College a couple of years later. But so yeah, that's how I ended up down in Seatown. And it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
When you first got on campus, did you feel like it was a fit right away, or was there any issues with transition?
I mean, it's a good question. I think I'll be honest. I mean, I get down there and there was a big roster. And so I wasn't sure, I was like, man, all these players, Maryland players, there's a few from Long Island and there's some from upstate. And I just didn't know where I fit in. And, and so, it took, probably took a couple of weeks. I can't exactly remember, but, you're just a little nervous. You're just not sure. Right. And I think a lot of us have probably gone through that stage where okay, it's a new, it's a different opportunity, and I'd come out of high school and then I went to college, and now it's like, okay, you're going up to that next level, and I hadn't been playing all that long. I've been playing literally 5 years, and so I did wonder how I was going to fit in, but I think I probably started out, I can't exactly remember. I wasn't on the first midfield. I know the first couple of weeks, but it didn't take long before, eventually I was able to, work my way up the depth chart. But yeah.
I always ask that question because I'm curious. I even think back to my college experience when I was, sort of similar to the transition that you're talking about. I was from Long Island, New York. And then I went down south to a totally different college experience. And there's like a little bit of a culture shock, and it takes a few weeks to sort of figure that out. So I'm curious, what do you when you deal with that nowadays? When there's a freshman who comes to school, comes to Navy, and maybe there is a little bit of I'm sure there is most of the time a little bit of a learning curve, a little bit of a culture shock.
Sure.
What do you tell these kids those first couple weeks, those first months of their time away in school?
Yeah, I just try to relate to them, that it's something that we all have to go through, and certainly here, as you mentioned, it's a unique situation. It's not like, most other, college and university environments, particularly, for the for the freshmen, they call them plebes here, because they don't get a lot of leave time on the weekends, and they're doing an awful lot of other military obligations outside of going to school, and of course being a Division I lacrosse player. So I just try to relate to them that it's just all part of life, going through the transition. Whatever stories we could share that that even though it's different. I went to my transitioning to Washington College, a different environment, as you alluded to, just a total. Again, I alluded to it earlier, where it was a different environment by way of me being an upstate versus Maryland, Eastern Shore. This is not afraid to throw this out. Certainly being an African American, certainly adds a little bit more to it. But I think. Just expressing to these young men that hey, it's kind of like, hey, we everyone has to go through it. You'll get through it. Just take it day by day. And I think them knowing, especially at the end of the day, we practice in the afternoons, that they're going to go out and play something that they enjoy. That immediate bonding that takes place with when you join a team, and certainly the way that our upperclassmen, our seniors, really our entire team, even our sophomores, welcome our players with open arms, and the way they treat them. It really helps accelerate that transition and that comfort level of feeling a part of the team, And so it's not. I play a little bit of a role, but the team does such a great job that my role is secondary, compared to as I mentioned, the upper class seniors and the captain.
Sense.
So
makes sense. After Washington College, what made you want to start coaching?
Well, that happened when I was between summers of my freshman and sophomore year of college. I went back home, and one of my buddies who I graduated with, his dad, who was he was very much into youth sports. He was involved in youth football, youth basketball, youth baseball. The guy was unbelievable. And so he started a youth lacrosse program in our area. And so me and one of my best buddies, we decided that we wanted to coach in it. And man, did we have a ball. It was just awesome. We were coaching these kids. They were in fifth and sixth grade, sixth and seventh grade, that age. And so we started coaching. There was probably, I think there was like 6 teams the first year. And we just had a ball with these kids, and I just fell in love with it really at that point. I was like, man, I would love to be a coach. I thought, a high school coach, thought I'd be a gym teacher, Joe, to be honest with you. That was what I want. I was like, man, I'd love to be a gym teacher where, I could just kind of play all day and, just be around sports and coach. And so that's when it, really hit me. And then I had to finish school after I stopped playing lacrosse at Washington College. In 1985 was my last year of eligibility, but I had to go back in the fall because I transferred and credits and the whole thing. So I had to some more school. So but I wanted to get back to Coach Corcoran, for everything that he had meant for to me and my life. I was just fortunate enough to play for him and the opportunity that he gave for me. So I wanted to get back to him, and so I decided to stay that whole year to help him. And then I decided to stay another year. So I was there for 2 years after I stopped playing in 1986 and 1987. Steve Bevel, good buddy of mine, who's now the Cortland State head coach. He and I both stayed and basically did the same thing. And back then it was a lot different with assistant coaches, and we had part-time jobs. I worked at a sporting goods store, and we were doing other things to make ends meet. But it was great, though. It really was, just fun to, again, be a part of, the Washington College program, learning a different side of the coaching side of it and what it takes there with recruiting and all of that. But, and so, those 2 years were very valuable
Right.
for me in terms of taking the next step.
Yeah. So if you can remember back, what were the biggest lessons you learned those first 2 years, of coaching right after playing?
Man, an awful lot goes into just planning a practice, and just being on the other side and understanding, how to relate to the player to get across certain things, and the player, you look at it one way, but, as a coach, especially since, and I'm still playing an awful lot too. And, maybe at times, I'm sure, I know, being frustrated, like, why aren't these guys getting this? It's
Right.
like, we coach it, like what, and
Right.
I'm sure all the coaches go through that phase where, there's a frustration, you thinking that, you say it, let's go do it. And it just doesn't happen that way. And the other big piece I learned, I think too, Joe, and I will admit, I've struggled with from time to time, but I certainly, it got me going back then, was
Mm-hmm.
coaching, trying to connect with different personalities,
Right.
and, you just can't be the same way with everyone. Sometimes, maybe you got to kick a guy in the butt, but other
Mm-hmm.
times you gotta, maybe you got to back off and
Right.
be, as they say, you get more, what's the saying? You get more flies with honey or whatever, just
Right.
being,
Yeah. Yeah.
being nice. And so, that just learning how to, and that's not to say that you still can't be firm,
Mm-hmm.
and I do consider myself a fair but firm coach, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. But those are just some of the things that I started to learn, just, and just being around Coach Corcoran, and I mean, he's just, he's got a, just tremendous mind, lacrosse mind. And so,
Right.
just learning under him,
Yeah.
that was, I guess you could say, the foundation, but I could
Right.
even go back to my high school coach and what we learned from him and the approach that he took towards us,
Mm-hmm.
and how that translated to success. So.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because this is one thing that I do hear from a lot of coaches that come on the show is, you need to learn sort of to tailor your, not everybody responds the same way, to coaching. And I'm curious, is how do you learn to get better at that? I mean, I'm sure that's a hard question to answer, but how do you learn to deal with certain kids differently than others?
Yeah, that's a hard one, and I'm still I still have my my times when I look back, and I'll get on a guy, and then I'll wonder, like, man, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Right.
He
Right.
probably needed a little bit different
Mm-hmm.
approach than what I gave him. But I think, to be honest with you, I really do think that once they get to know who you are and
Mm-hmm.
what you're about, I think that helps a lot too. They see different sides of you.
Right.
And just as much as I want to work hard and practice, and we do get after it pretty hard, I like to think a lot of times I do like to put fun into it as well, and so I don't
Mm-hmm.
want them to always think the coach is a bad guy, and
Right.
and so we have fun, and I bust their chops, and they give it back to me too, and I know some of the young guys, at times are probably wondering, like, oh my God, coach is poking fun at this guy, and this guy's busting coach's chops, and coach is, he doesn't
Right.
mind, and I'm sure it's kind of a natural, freshmen aren't going to, um, bust a coach's chops.
Right.
It takes a couple of years before you get to that point, of having
Right.
that
Right.
comfort, level with the coach. But I think that has helped me. And I will say this, that has been something, and I've been coaching long enough now where, I like to think that I've matured, but I've fought that early in my career because I was a stubborn, coach, and maybe at times, hot-headed, and too, probably, overdid it,
Mm-hmm.
from time to time, and so, I think it's, for me, it's easy for me to say now because I do feel like I've really changed, but me
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, 25 years ago, we probably be having a different conversation, but
Hmm.
I do think though, being able to show different sides of you, and just, again, bringing them in the office, having conversations with them, not necessarily about lacrosse, about life, about, whatever interests them. And when they know that you care, and I think that's something a lot of coaches will point to, that you care about them, beyond them helping you try to win a ball game. I think that helps too, and so, when I get on him, he understands that, maybe coach is mad and like, man, coach, get off my back, but, there's a respect factor there. And, the young man knows that, maybe I don't want to hear what coach, is telling me. He thinks I need to hear it. But maybe I don't like the way he is giving it to me. But in the end, I think once they may not at that second, but once they take a second to think about it, I really do think they understand, they get it, and you come out the next day and you take a different approach with them, and then you move on, and hopefully we've gotten better as a result.
Right, makes sense. So how did you end up at Georgetown?
I ended up at Georgetown. I guess there's an old adage: if you can't beat them, join them. Coach Urich, who we couldn't beat. We beat once my senior year. We beat them during the regular season. We actually broke they had a 40-something game winning streak, Division III winning streak. They had, as you played at Syracuse, played against Hobart, but back in the '80s, they were just a powerhouse. And then he leaves Hobart to come to Georgetown, and that was huge back then. I think it was 1989, and that was like when Tierney leaves Princeton to go to Denver. I mean, that was huge news. And so his first year, he had a couple assistants, but they were part-time assistants, and they told him after his first year that they would have the resources for him to hire a full-time assistant. And so I was at St. Albans at the time. I had coached at St. Albans when I left Washington College after the 1987 season. I moved to Washington, D.C. With a good buddy of mine, Kevin Givelin, who was a teammate of mine at Washington College. He had moved the year earlier, and so he said, come on over to Washington, D.C. And so I ended up going over there, living with him, and he ended up getting me set up with St. Albans. He took the job at Georgetown. He had worked there the year before, but took the job at Georgetown Prep, where he became, a legend of a coach. He spent 20-something years there and won a gazillion games and sent a number of players on to college. You probably played down at Virginia. You played with any Georgetown Prep players? You remember?
Yeah, definitely.
So I was there at St. Albans for 3 years. And we knew each other. I used to work his lacrosse camp. I actually went to football camp up there. But his first year, he'd come to a lot of our games. He'd come to a lot of our games, and seeing our team play, and because St. Albans and Georgetown University are very close. It's basically like a mile up the road, and we used to practice at a field off the St. Albans school grounds. We had to take a bus to practice, which was right across the street from Georgetown University. So he'd come over and watch our practice, and he'd come to a lot of our games. And so we got to know each other pretty well that year. And so when the year was up and he could hire a full-time assistant, he asked me to be his assistant. And it took me about 3 seconds to say yes. Here I was, going to work for, Dave Urich and at a school such as Georgetown University, and they were really committed to, building the program. And so ended up spending 8 great years with him and his family. I'm still very, 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 very close with his family, Scott Urich, who I'm sure you've heard of Scott Urich, and two daughters, Holly and Mindy. Holly's the oldest child, Scott's the middle child, and then Mindy. We're still very close to this day. And you want to talk about learning, and it was a different style, Joe. Totally different style from my high school coach to my college coach, Coach Corcoran and Coach Moffitt. Coach Urich, it was a totally different style. And I think that was probably one of the reasons. I don't know if we've ever talked about it. I'm guessing it's one of the reasons why he hired me. because I was a pretty good bad cop, and he loved being the good cop, you know. And so
right.
We had a great, it was a great combination. And as I mentioned, it was just 8 great years that, spending under him and building the program up and having some great experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can remember, what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned from Coach Urich?
Oh man, he just he had, first of all, giving back to the sport, which I always had, again, I coached a bunch but that he was really big on that, giving back to the sport. But one of the biggest lessons, one of many, was just how humble he was, and the approach that he took. And people used to come in all the time, who heard of him, whether they were, sports, vendors and people just coming in would know about Coach Urich. You would think, that he would have this big ego, and he would just be, just be one of those guys that just, very, I don't know, loud and just, confident. But he was so humble, and he was just another guy. He was just another guy, and I just learned. I mean, he would, he wasn't afraid to, when we had to, back in those days when, there was snow on the field, maybe he had to shovel the snow off the field. He's out there shoveling the snow off the field, the head coach, he's not having, the assistant steward or the players. Now he was, we were all doing it, but he was doing it, and
right.
So, that was just, and then just the things that you learned, just his family values, and for so many years, and I still do it every once in a while, but certainly when I first became head coach, and this is, I guess, the sign of, him having a really big impact. That, whenever it came to a tough decision, like what would Coach Urich think? What would he be thinking? And just how he handled situations, I mean, I was again kind of I don't say a hothead by any means. I don't want to say, I was one of these guys that was just a raving lunatic, because that wasn't me at all. But I used to be hard on our guys, and he showed me another way. He really did, and I also do think he did like the way that, my approach. But he refined me, and kind of took some, kind of took some of the rough edges off my coaching. And again, I think some of that was, maturity and that kicks in too. But, he was a funny guy. He was just the guys enjoyed our practices. Go back, we're talking about planning fun practices. I mean, he went out of his way to make sure, the guys that, the practice was fun, and you could work hard, but you could still have fun. He definitely was all about that. So, those are just some of the things, but there's just so many. I'd have to continue to think a little bit harder to to come up with them. But it was just a great 8 years for me.
The one thing that always will stick in my mind about Coach Urich, and I won't mention any other coaches' names, but when you're being recruited in high school, and you have to tell a school that you're not going to go to their school, sometimes you don't always get the best reaction from, the head coaches, and that's understandable, because you're saying like, hey, I'd rather go to another school over your school. And, that's might be hard to take sometimes. And I got some, when I committed to Virginia, I got some, I don't want to say bad reactions, but definitely people weren't happy about me turning them down. But when I called Coach Urich at Georgetown and let him know, hey, Coach, I appreciate your time, but I am going to go to Virginia. He was the only coach that was more or less like, actually what he said to me was, good for you, young man. He was so happy for me. And he was so, there was no sort of animosity, or he wasn't annoyed. He was just like, you know what? I'm happy for you. I think you're going to do great there. It was great. I have nothing but good things to say about him.
That's classic Coach Urich. That is him. He gets it, and not that you and I could, I know we're talking about different, another topic, but I just don't understand why coaches, like what good it does for them
Yeah.
When a young man calls me, I wish him the best of luck. Yeah, you bummed
Right.
out. You're disappointed that, he decided to go somewhere else, and he's a damn good player like yourself. And you're like, dang, but man, what?
Yeah.
I don't know what good it does to have
Yeah.
some of these reactions that I do hear about all the time, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I had heard that it happens, and I always thought people were exaggerating. I had one coach more or less hang up on me, basically say like, well, I think you're making a mistake, and then hang up, and it just didn't. I couldn't believe it. But,
you're what, 17 years old, and that's tough enough for you to have to pick the phone up to make that call. It really is,
right.
Right. 17-year-old, 18-year-old young man, that's not an easy call to make,
Right.
And so, to just make it, harder on the young man, I just don't get it. And,
right. Yeah.
You'll, that's one thing I'm very proud of, and you'll never hear that story about me. You just will never hear it, because I just won't. Right. I won't go there. I just won't go there.
Right.
But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the way to handle it, because I mean, like I'm even saying right now, I still remember that reaction from Coach Urick. Yeah, right. I'll remember that for the rest of my life. Yeah,
you'll never forget.
Right, exactly. All right, so I'm keeping my eye on the clock. I want to make sure we get through everything. So
Sure.
I know we could talk about Dartmouth and St. John's, but I want to make sure we spend enough time on Navy. So could we skip ahead a little bit, and could we talk about how you ended up at the Naval Academy?
Yeah, I was I was at Stony Brook. I spent 5 years there, and was really happy there, to be honest with you. Which, if you had told me 10 years, 15 years before I moved to even St. John's, if you had told me that I would ever live on Long Island someday, I would have told you there's no way that was going to happen. That was all my years of recruiting, at Georgetown, going up to Hofstra and having to see, all the, the sectional games. The traffic there, and I felt like I got lost every time I went up there. Right. You're like, how can anyone live here? And so, lo and behold, I take the St. John's job, and then, a couple of years later, I ended up, taking the Stony Brook job, and I, when I left, my family and I loved Long Island. Certainly the bagels and the pizza, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with either of those. But so yeah, we were very happy at Stony Brook. My wife worked at in the admissions department, and we were having some pretty good success. I know couldn't beat the Cavaliers, the Wahoos, though. We had a couple of really good games against them, and in the quarterfinals that one year, and then some of those regular season games. But so I'm sitting home. It was July, I guess, early July, and just someone reached out and asked if I would have any interest in the Naval Academy job, and I said, heck yeah. And I suppose I got to be somewhat tight-lipped on how things kind of progress from there, but that's right. What really got the ball rolling. I did, it was again, I was approached, and
right.
And then they got word back to the Naval Academy, and then kind of one thing led to another, and came down for an interview, hit it off with the with the AD, and before you knew it, I was heading down to Annapolis, Maryland, to take on this job, and right. So I've been lucky as heck, Joe. I mean, we mentioned Georgetown, 8 years there, and then I got a chance to work in the Ivy Leagues up at Dartmouth. People thought I was right. crazy for taking on that opportunity, and we were fortunate enough to to turn things around. It took me a few years, no doubt. Some people thought I'd never do it, and then they thought maybe I would go to a different program after Georgetown, and then after Dartmouth, and I go to St. John's. I go, start a program from scratch, and then I head out to Stony Brook. So I've been pretty fortunate, but to be here at the Naval Academy and to work, at a place like this with the young men that I get to work with, and the people, around the program, and just hear it's pretty special. It's pretty special opportunity that I have, and
Yeah.
believe you me, I remind myself and my team, what an honor it is not only to coach here, but also to play here on a regular basis.
Right.
I really.
Yeah. So I'm curious about, when you take over that job, I always ask coaches, how when they take over a new job, how they go about setting the tone for the program. But I would imagine this has an extra layer to it because, you're taking over a team at the United States Naval Academy. So how do you approach sort of setting the tone for your team, with a bunch of, you're at Navy. How do you approach that challenge?
Yeah, and you mentioned the extra layer, and the extra layer when I took the program over at the Naval Academy, unlike other places, was the fact that I took over for a very popular coach.
Right.
So that's what made it even more challenging for me, to be honest with you. In other places I've taken over, Dartmouth, they hadn't had a lot of success in many years, and coming in and it was a little, even though there were, you are, coming in and kind of putting your stamp on the program, it's not like, they had a lot of success and that sort of thing. So I guess It was a little easier, even though the fact that they didn't have a lot of success, it was, those first couple of years were very tough when it came to, trying to get some wins. But coming here, even though they hadn't had success for a couple of years before I got here, so it wasn't like they could sit here and go, "Hey, you're coming in and you're changing something that's not broke." The fact that they really, they loved their head coach before me, Coach Meade, and he was very popular. He was a great coach while he was here, and so I used to kid, Vince Lombardi could have came through the door, or Newt Rockney could have come through those doors, and that was still going to be tough for them, and
right.
So the transition was a little tougher, and so as a result. And I look back on this, and I think, and I've said this before, so this isn't, maybe not all of it's been, out for public, but those first couple of years were there some regrets? Yes, the way I went about some things, because I did have in mind that, it was a team that, was missing their head coach, and meanwhile I'm trying to come in and put my foot down, but I'm also trying to be aware of, the kind of the sensitivity of the program, and then on top of that we weren't having success, so that made it worse, and things were being second guessed, and I think the players too. I know a number of them have, gone out of the way to, tell me some things, them regretting how, things went those first couple of years too. So it was very challenging, Joe. It really was. On top of the fact, as you mentioned, that extra layer, I think you were thinking, that it was maybe I was going to be a different answer, but on top of the fact that a place like the Naval Academy is not, as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, it's different from 99.9% of the other schools out there. It's us as West Point and Air Force, really. And so learning and getting used to, and, as I've said a number of times over the years, it was like learning a new language, and it was more like a Japanese language, not a Spanish language, and so, so you had that adjustment to make as well. And, again, those first couple of years, it added up to, just a whole lot of frustration from a lot of different people.
Right.
But, we slowly but surely, started to, kind of put my foot down. It really, to be honest with you, I think it was my third year. It was one of these deals where I said, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to do it my way. And I don't care. Whatever happens. So, at that point where you just go, hey, enough. This is how it's going to be. If you don't like it, and I tried to, I was like, I don't care if it's the best player on the team. If he doesn't want to be a part of it, that's fine, And so that fall, I really, I went after it hard with them. Now, what I didn't know till the springtime, till April, was that the captain at the time, this young man by the name of Brendan Gain, he had told the team that year, that fall, he said, fellas, whatever coach throws at us, we're not going to complain. We're just going to take it. We're just not going to be no complaining, enough.
Right.
And I didn't find that out till April. And, because that fall, we'd get up early in the morning, and I was putting them through these just very hard workouts. And they'd be like, what do you got for me? I was just not literally, but I'd work them hard, and I'd be like, man, these guys, so the next day I'd crank it up a little higher, and they were just not breaking. They were just not, and we ended up having just a really good fall, and that was the year we started to turn. That was 2015. That was the year we really started to turn things around. We had some success that year. Then the next year, that's when we went to the quarterfinals. But it was that year, when we started beating Army for the first time. It had been a while since we had beaten Army, and so it's been 4 years in a row now we've beaten Army, which has been huge. And so, but yeah, those first couple of years, the transition of taking over a very popular coach. As I said, I broke the cardinal sin of the cardinal rule of coaches. You don't want to replace the popular coach. You want to replace the coach that replaces the popular coach. And, so I've managed to kind of fight through it all, and
so
here we are today.
I think what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that those first couple years you were approaching coaching the team about like, all right, I'm replacing a popular coach. Everybody liked him, and you're trying to maybe think about how do I need to mold myself to the way things used to be here, rather than being like, how do I, being like, how do I be myself here? Is that the correct way? Like you sort of.
Well, there's no question.
Yeah.
How can I mold myself? Not so much to how they used to be, but mold myself where, I can be who I need to be, and not, and it's really a lot of, it's not so much me changing who I was, but just trying to continue to be who I am. But just coming in and because I think I consider myself a fair but firm coach. So being firm, I think there are just times where I was again maybe it was wrong. Maybe I should have just come in and said this is how it's going to be, and my way or the highway. But I just respected. I just was sensitive to. Them and again, a lot of things I did. And there were some things I was like, this is me, and this is, I was thinking more about me. And then there's some things I was thinking more about them, and and then there was some times where I was confused because I didn't know, do I have to treat them? Do I have to treat them this way because they're at the Naval Academy, or can I treat them this way because they're athletes, or how do I treat them? And sometimes I zigged and I should have zagged, and listening to people who maybe I listened to too many people instead of just making that decision. And I thought I would get all these different opinions, and that just screwed me up. And it wasn't. Maybe I don't want to make it sound like it was. It was every day, but just there was just times when, and especially when you're not winning on top of it, and so now they don't, now they're looking at you like, that, they don't have a lot of confidence, and I'm like, well, geez, we weren't winning before we got here. Maybe if you listen to me, maybe maybe things will change. And so it was just, just went through some of that where I think at times it was, there was some stubbornness on both sides. I think, the players at times, I think I was stubborn at times. And then I go the other way, and then I would say, okay, maybe I got to be a little bit more sensitive to them. But then I'm fighting things. I'm fighting my own instincts. I'm like, this is not me, but I have to, and then I get ticked off at myself because I'm letting something happen that I don't maybe believe in. You know what I'm saying? And so there's where.
So how has it changed? How is the tone, and how is your approach today versus then?
Oh, it's easy. I mean, now it's, again, once those first couple of years, and we put our foot down, then we started having success, and then now it's, the other side of it too, is, you're recruiting players that you develop the relationship, their sophomore years in high school, their junior years in high school. So now, it's just a lot different than when you come in and you take over a program and you don't know these guys, and so, and they don't know you. It goes back to what I was saying about even how I coach them, you're coming in as this new coach, you start yelling and screaming at these guys and they're looking at you like, who are you? They don't know you yet, and so, now they, these guys know who I am. When the freshmen come in, the older guys can now tell them this is who Coach Sowell is. If they, if something happens at practice, that's just Coach. He's going to get on you for a little bit, but he's going to love you up the next minute. Don't worry about it. Just keep, just listen to what he's saying and try to, do it right the next time. And so, you have that, just that whatever you want to call it, support or connection, or just that they know who I am now, having some success helps for sure. But also you recruiting these guys now, of course, the rules have changed. So, you're not recruiting them when they're ninth graders now, we got to wait till after their sophomore years. We get, we get to start recruiting them in July. Everybody else has to wait till September. That's a service academy rule that we didn't have anything to do with it. But so we get a couple months start on the rest of the field. But so that it's just much easier now, being here for, this is my 8th season now. So it's, I got things the way things are, pretty much the way I like it. And, I have great relationships with all my captains, which helps. Like this morning, I got a text because I've gone hard on them the last 3 days. It's our second week. And I told them it was going to be hard. But the captain's like, Coach, just want to let you know, and I know our guys are sore and tired, and I'm going to take my foot off the gas pedal today because we're going to have an inter-squad scrimmage tomorrow. But I rely on them a lot to tell me how the team's thinking, what they're feeling. Now, you got to respect if I say we're still going to do it this way, but then there's times where when they come to me and I go, you know what, let's do it that way, and so we have that type of relationship, which, those first couple of years, it was just hard to establish that connection,
Yeah, and, makes sense.
We have it in spades now.
So I want to talk about, how you guys run practice. So can you walk us through what a typical in-season practice would be like for you guys?
Yeah. We, well, I guess this time of the year versus once the season starts, it's a little different, right? You start preparing for your opponent. But we typically, according to the course of a Monday through Friday, you play on Saturday, and we only have one midweek game, I think, this year, which I like very much. I don't like midweek games. I mean, I think with the parity in our sport these days, and our league, and so treating it similar to football, we're just playing once a week. Really does. To me, I think it's in the best interest of our program, and I do think at a place like the Naval Academy, with these guys and what they have to go through, during the week, sometimes those midweek games could be a bear. Believe it or not, midweek games on the road sometimes might be a little easier than midweek games at home, just because we get to get away and get them off the yard.
Oh, right.
But we have. Typically we have just one or two. This year we have one. So, Monday we are, I'm a big fundamental guy, Joe. I really do strongly believe in fundamentals. I believe in, teams, my teams are typically in really good shape. That's a big part of, how my philosophy. And I think at a place like the Naval Academy where it's the Naval Academy, we're representing, we're future leaders, and there's just something about, because, I think it's the same with West Point and Air Force. You're whether you're a fan of Syracuse or Virginia or whoever you're a fan of, and I don't know if it's the next school or the second, but most people are fans of the service academies. You know what I mean? There's something about the service academies. People respect what these young men are committing to, and their futures as leaders of, our countries in some way. And, some of these young men, what they're going to go off and do, say, being a Navy SEAL. I mean, it just garners just a tremendous amount of respect. And, the fact that they compete at a high Division I, sport, I think also lends itself to just rooting for, the service academy. So we take, we don't take that lightly. I don't, I think representing our, when we go out there, we want our opponents to know that, man, we're going to play hard for 60 minutes. At the end of the game, whether we win, lose, or draw, you're going to respect us beyond just the fact that we go to the Naval Academy. And so my teams are typically, conditioning's a very high priority. Fundamentals are a high priority for me. But we'll practice. We usually practice in the afternoons, 3:45 we start. We'll have a position after we warm ups. We'll have a position period where I'll take the middies, and Coach Wellner will take the defense, and Coach Camposa will take the goalies, Coach Parks will take the attack, and we'll work on something fundamental. It may be a shooting drill, it's dodging or stick work, something along those lines. And then we like to, depending upon the flavor of the day, maybe earlier in the week, say on a Tuesday, we want to get up and down a lot more, or Monday, Tuesday. So a lot of transition drills and up and down. Of course, the players love that. They love getting up and down, and, especially the offensive guys. So we'll that will be part of what we do. Then we'll work on our riding and our clearing, and we'll do them. We may do a lot of full field where, okay, this 10-minute period is just all transition, and then the next 10 minutes we're going to work on our rides and clears. Now we may drill it too before we go into the ride and clear part of it. So maybe today we're going to emphasize, the 10-man ride versus a drop back ride. And so we'll tailor it to what we want to really focus on that day. And one thing that I think being here at the Naval Academy, I'm really conscious of is our guys, during the summertime, they don't get a heck of a lot of time to play lacrosse and work on their games or what have you, because they have professional training. And so they'll get a 4-week block where they have leave time. They go, they go home, they go on vacation or wherever. And, if they get lucky and it's towards the end of the summer, maybe they'll catch a tournament or two, Lake Placid or Ocean City, or, I know there's ones up in New Jersey too that our guys have played in, but playing in a league the whole summer and 3 months off and being able to play a ton of lacrosse, that's just not happening here at the Naval Academy. Right. So, so as a result, when we come back in the fall, I just feel it's important, and I know I'm talking fall now versus spring, but it does there is a tie into it, because even during the springtime, we feel that playing a lot for our guys, it's they need to play a lot, but we certainly in the fall, they come back, we really do let them play and try to have that fun that you have during summer league, you know what I mean? Where you're running around, you're playing and it's not that loose, but we do want, we're trying to get something out of practice, don't get me wrong, but we do, it is my philosophy that, man, these guys don't get a lot of time to play in the fall and the summer. So we want them, and so we typically play twice during the fall too, just to give them something to look forward to. This past year we played actually 2 back-to-back weekends. We played Rutgers and UMass up at Rutgers, and then the following weekend we played Towson and St. Joe's. So that was great. We got a lot of lacrosse, against some really good teams. And so so that philosophy, it does carry over into the spring where, we do try to play a lot throughout the course of the week and learn while they're playing, versus just a bunch of drills and that sort of thing. Now we shoot a lot. We try to dodge a lot, to be honest with you. And this first week and a half or so, of course, you're trying to address everything. Last week we really focused on the riding and the clearing part of the game. And then this week we settled into more of the half field, the off, the offense, defense. Like last week we had to, believe it or not, we had an even shorter shot clock because we didn't want to play as much 6-on-6. We just wanted to react to different situations and transition and rides and clears and working on the substitution game. And so that was our focus last week. And, but as I said, this week, the focus has been more extra man. We've been doing a lot of extra man. We've been doing a lot of half field. We've been doing a lot of working on our substitution. The games that you play where you're trying to pick the guy off and or maybe you're playing five guys. Five guys are playing, on offense, and you stick the one guy out, off to the side. And so we're, those games, if nothing else, we have to defend against teams that, we know the teams will do that to us. We do, and we're doing some of it ourselves. So we, that was something that we worked on this week. And so, as I mentioned, the first couple of weeks, there's so much you got to work on everything, But once you get into the season, it starts to get a little bit more, especially you start preparing for the opponent. We typically want our Tuesdays to be very hard weeks, very hard days, just because I want our guys, even though we only play one midweek game, I just want our guys to have that mindset that we play on a Saturday. We have Sunday, Monday. We might have to play a game on a Tuesday, and we may have to play one of our Patriot League tournament games. We've been fortunate to get to buy a few of those years where we haven't played on that Tuesday. But if you don't get one of the first two seeds, if you get 4 through 6, or 3 through 6, excuse me, you're playing on that Tuesday, after, the end of your season. So you could have to play on Tuesday, then a Friday, then a Sunday, in our Patriot League tournament. So we just like to, that mindset of Tuesday is going to be a hard day because, we may have to play on a Tuesday someday. So that tends to be a day where we're doing a lot of running and we're working on ground ball work and that sort of thing. And then Wednesday we start preparing for our opponent. What we're, if there's anything funky that we're seeing that you're doing that we got to spend a little extra time on, and Coach Warner certainly, getting a beat on their offense. So we'll spend time those, Wednesday, Thursday, of course, Friday, we don't do a heck of a lot. We're probably out there for maybe an hour, doing stick work, shooting, some fun drills that, the guys get into, and then we'll usually have a really good meal for them. If we're at home, we practice in our stadium on Fridays. We don't practice in the stadium throughout most of the week. We practice right here on the yard, and they don't call it a campus here. They call it the yard. So, but on Fridays of home games, we'll go in the stadium. The guys love just being up there and just, getting psyched for the game tomorrow, the next day, and we'll have a nice meal for them. And so that's kind of it. Right. I mean, I didn't get too specific, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Right. So then what, when you guys are preparing for an upcoming opponent, again, sort of same thing. You have a game on Saturday. What does your week look like in terms of how you're preparing for an opponent that you're going to play on Saturday?
So we'll start watching film. Of course, Monday's a big film day. If, you play on Saturday, give them Sunday off. Monday, it's usually a light day. We lift. That's a lift day too. Mondays and Wednesdays are lift days, and we lift in the middle of the day here. We'll lift at lunchtime, and we watch a lot of film at lunchtime too, because again, their days are pretty structured, and they may have free periods throughout the day that we like sixth period, which is similar to a high school structure where sixth period, that's the last period of the day. And most of our guys, they call them a blocker. You get a 6-period blocker. If you're a varsity athlete, you get 6 period off so you can start to go get ready for practice. Not everyone. You may get unlucky and have a class where that it's only given a certain time, and it's that 6th period, and so not everyone gets these blocker, but 95% of the guys on our team have 6th period off, which is nice. It really is. So we can watch film. They can get treatment before practice, so that helps. But as I mentioned, we do start practice at 3:45, that Monday it's all us. Tuesday is typically all us. Wednesday, Thursday, we start turning our attention to, our opponent, film too. Our guys, as most teams are, are very into the film, and of course the modern technology that we have here, where we watch it as a team, or we can send it. DV Sport, we use DV Sport here. They have what they call 360. So our guys, it's an app where we can send them a video clip. If I watch something in practice, and we film every one of our practices. Well, Friday practices we don't finish, or we don't film, but Monday through Thursday practices. So if there's something that we see in practice that we want to show our guys, we can just send it right to them, and then we can put comments on it. But we do the same thing with our opponents too. We can, with the scouting. We can send them, hey, look at this defense that we're going to see here, and we're going to work against it, this afternoon when we get out to practice. And so we have our guys are really committed. We have a scout team. Our scout team guys, they're really into it, boy. They watch film and, they really help prepare us for our opponents. They really do. Our guys here, I think, pride themselves on, not wanting to let their teammates down. I know there's other places where I've coached where if you're a senior, especially, and you're not playing, that could be challenging, to be motivated to show up every day and give it 100% in practice. And I think we probably all have seen it from time to time, but here it's just not like that. Our guys are just all in, and again, I do think it's because the uniqueness of what they go through here, and it's hard and it's different, and they just don't want to let their teammates down. They are very selfless. They really are. And so our scout team guys are really, really into it. And let them score a goal. Let the scout team guys score a goal in practice. You think they won a national championship. I mean, and it really ticked off our guy. They'll still get all ticked off. And so it's a fun thing, though. It really is. But so that's usually, again, Wednesday, Thursday, where we zero in on our opponent and maybe clean up some things on Friday in regards to our opponent as well. But that Friday is, short practice, some stick work, some extra man down, maybe just a little, you want to go through a few things, you don't want guys banging on each other. So it's, it's a low intensity practice and then you hope Saturday we're ready to go.
Yeah. And so when you guys do look at opponents, are you mostly looking at individuals on your opponent, or are you mostly looking at like general team tendencies?
Well, probably both. You certainly got to look out for the tendencies and, what kind of offensive set they're running, how we think they're going to defend us, and looking for, again, those tendencies. But when you have a player such as, Pat Spencer for Loyola, well, you better zero in on him, because he is a special player. And so, he spent a little bit more time, trying to defend him, versus, maybe their offense, because he's a big part of their offense. So it is a little bit of both. Or say we're playing a team like Lehigh, who last year they played a lot of zone, and so that's a week where we're spending a lot of time on the defense versus any individual defender per se. But so yeah, I think most teams will probably say it's a little bit of both. Maybe some weeks it's more the individual versus the other week it's more of team tendencies. I will tell you this: I'm a big believer, Joe, and if we do the things that we're supposed to do, the things that we we focus on in practice based on our philosophy, I do think along those lines, if we do those things, then it's going to lead to success. I don't get overly into every little detail about our opponent. I really don't. I just think again, a good fundamentally sound team could, I think, could cover up, could take care of a lot of maybe those tendencies that teams have, and so I am a more throughout. My assistant coaches are more the opponent, throughout the week. I'm more us throughout the week.
Right.
And so, but of course I know what our opponents are doing, but I'm focusing more about what we're doing in practice, how we're doing it, where they're focusing more about, okay, getting our team ready for our opponents,
Right.
offensively and defensively. Yeah.
Makes sense. So just real quick, I do want to ask you about, the rule changes for this season.
Sure.
How are you guys preparing for, the 80-second shot clock? Do you guys, are you practicing it? You mentioned you do run through practice. Are you guys practicing it during the year, or is it, something you're just, hoping your players naturally get?
No, yeah, we right out of the gate, going back to last fall, we've been practicing it, and we've been working on, we're starting to, the situational awareness of, the shot clock.
Right.
Will teams play? How much zone will they play? Will they play it at 15 seconds left in the shot clock? Will they play it right from the beginning of the shot clock? We're preparing for all that. Teams riding. Are they going to pressure ride you? Because if you're forcing a team to have to work to clear it, so they're 16, 17, 18 seconds, they clear it. Maybe they got to get D midfielders out of the game. Next thing you know, they got 50 seconds left to run offense, and
right.
So we're working on that ourselves defensively, trying to ride and really force them to use as much of that 20 seconds. So it leaves them less time, to run their offense. But we're also preparing ourselves, to clear against a pressure defense. That's a ride that, that's going to make us, take more time than we want to clear it. So that's been a big part. No question.
Right.
And again, I think everybody agrees these new rules. And I'll be honest with you, Joe, I was one of the coaches, so I didn't really care. I thought the old rules weren't that bad. And the shot clock, you want a shot clock? Sure. And so I wasn't passionate one way or the other. Yeah. But I like the rules. I like the new rules. I think it's longer. It's not that it's you can get some offense in, you can, right. It's not that quick where I know the MLL, it's 60 seconds from basically the get go. The 80-second, I do like that. I know some people have a problem, and who knows, I think, maybe in a couple of years it will change, and I won't have a problem with it either. But if you get the reset to 80 seconds, it resets back to 80 seconds if it hits the pipe or ricochets off the goalie, where some people feel that it should, if you get a reset, it probably shouldn't be that long. Similar to what basketball did 60, on an offensive rebound, right? It's not.
That seems to make sense to me. That's and sort of to what you were alluding to. I mean, I only remember it as a player. I've obviously never coached under a shot clock, but my first time playing with a 60-second shot clock in the MLL, I loved it. I thought it was great. It was one thing that I wish we had when we were playing college. And I also remember, and I've said this on the show since the 80-second shot clock has come out, it's more time than you actually think.
There is, Joe. I agree.
And what ends up happening is, the players that aren't used to it, you get the ball on offense and you work the ball around a couple of times. Then you go to the cage because you feel like you don't have enough time left, but you realize there's 45 seconds left on the shot clock. Yep. There's way more time than you actually realize.
Way more time.
Yeah. I don't think it'll be too much of a transition, but I do think it's a good. I do think it's a good move. I'm happy that they made it. What about the dive? Have you guys been practicing that at all?
No.
No.
That is the one rule. That is the one rule of all the things that were talked about with the new, the last couple of years. That's the one that came out of nowhere with all these meetings that
I agree.
we were in. It's like, where did this come from? And somehow it snuck its way through. And I think I don't know too many coaches that love the rule. And especially with the odds of that are the chances of getting a penalty, a non-releasable penalty if you dive into the goal and hit the goalie or what have you. And so I just think I just think that dive, man. If you're that defender coming across the crease, he's coming at your legs, and you're
right.
jumping up and down. Guys getting hit in the knee and the shins, and
Yeah.
I just think we're just asking for. You want to talk about increasing chances of getting hurt? Forget about the goalie. Just diving across, hitting that defender, or hurting yourself, your shoulder, and I don't know. I didn't think it was necessary to the game.
To be honest with you, so I'm sort of I'm in the middle ground of when I played lacrosse is when I was really young, like playing 4th, 5th, 6th grade lacrosse. You weren't allowed to dive just because we were too young, right? Like
sure.
that wasn't in the rule book. That wasn't in the rule book. And then by the time I got to high school, they had outlawed the dive in the NCAA, so they outlawed it in high school. So I never played with it in high school, and obviously you weren't allowed to dive when I was in college my whole time, and I always thought that the reason why they outlawed the dive was because kids were getting hurt, and I sort of have the same reaction to you. I don't understand why it all of a sudden came back. I'm not saying that it shouldn't come back. I sort of want to see how it happens, and it feels like it's working well in the MLL, but I am sort of surprised that it's back. It sort of came out of nowhere. I'm not really sure that anybody was talking. I might be wrong about that, but I'm with you. Yeah, I do sort of feel like it came out of nowhere.
It'll be interesting to see how it does affect the game. Right. How many teams?
Yeah.
I know there was one team or a couple teams that were practicing it. They had like mattresses out or something, and they were
right.
practicing diving onto a mattress. Yeah. But a couple of our guys have done it. They did it back in the fall, and they were legitimate ones. They were good decisions when they did them. I was like, yeah, that right. is the one time that that makes sense to do. But
yeah, if you can make it work.
What's that?
If you can make it work, it's a good advantage. It's a good advantage for the offensive player.
Yeah, there, no question. Yeah. I just worry because we have this young man, awfully talented, and he's a lefty. He's really slick, and he's really got all those little cute moves, and he's a tough little. He's not that big,
mm-hmm.
but he's a tough guy, and he'll do anything to score a goal, And
right.
It's like, man, I just don't want. I want to be careful with him because
right.
I don't want him to get hurt. There was time in the scrimmage against Towson. He comes flying across the crease, and and he takes the shot. He didn't make it, but just the way he landed, I was like, oh my God, Chris
right.
can't stop, So you got to be careful, And
right.
He was laughing at me. He goes, Coach, it looks a lot worse than it feels. He goes, my mom tells me all the time that I got to be careful too, but, and I'm like, I'm with your mom,
Right.
He's just not afraid, and he'll do anything to get to the goal. And God knows I'm looking for it, but
I could imagine if I was playing when the dive was around, I probably would have dove a lot, but it's just something that I never really got used to, and it did sort of just take me by surprise, like you said, that it is all of a sudden back. Coach, listen, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I do appreciate the amount of time you've already taken, but there is one question that I've asked everybody who's come on the show. What are 3 things everyone should be doing every day to get better at whatever it is they do? It doesn't have to just be lacrosse.
Whatever. Well, right off the bat, I'm going to go with the working on some fundamental, something fundamental.
Mm-hmm.
If it's your, if you are playing lacrosse, working on your stick skills, working on, being a better athlete, whether it's, whether it's getting in the weight room, whether it's playing another sport,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of that. I also think, obviously the conditioning part, as I mentioned to you earlier, it's a big part of who
Mm-hmm.
I am. And watching it, whatever sport it be, or whatever activity it is, you can learn a lot from watching, the pros. And so,
right.
Those would be some of the things that I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe in the multi-sport athlete. I want to really kind of pound that point home.
Mm-hmm.
Bums me out when young men just, especially if they quit a sport that they're good at too, and just to play lacrosse. Because the one thing that you don't get when you are just playing one sport versus two, you don't get that competition that you're getting in that other sport, and that's a big developer, right? That competition. So I encourage the young kids to play multiple sports for as long as they can, and there'll be plenty of time to hone in on the lacrosse part, but you'll be a much better competitor as a result. So
right, makes sense. Well, Coach, listen, I really had a blast. Thanks for coming on and taking the time. Hopefully we can talk again soon.
This was great, Joe. I really appreciate it, man. It was great just catching up, shooting the breeze. Bring me back to my my younger days. It's been a while since I had to talk about how I got started with this sport, and my career as it developed through over the years. And
awesome.
So I appreciate it, and let's keep in touch, man.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the GameChanger Lacrosse Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Uvoli. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Uvoli. You can find more episodes of the GameChanger Lacrosse Podcast on The Season at theseason.gc.com. If you like the podcast, please take a second to give it a positive review on iTunes. This helps more people find the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at GC Sports. And if you're a coach, a parent, or you run a travel or club team, check out GameChanger Team Manager in the App Store. It's an essential, all-in-one scheduling and communication app for lacrosse coaches and parents. GameChanger Team Manager is free, it's easy to use, and it doesn't serve ads. Learn more at gc.com/team manager. Until next time, keep working and keep getting better.